Thank you for choosing American Pest CEUs. Hi, I'm Sean Reeves. I'm an Associate Certified Entomologist with American Pest CEUs. I've been in the pest management industry since 1999, and I'll be your instructor for today's course. Today's course was compiled by Jack Launius, who has served in the pest management industry since 1990. Today's course is going to be on submerged aquatic plants. Learning objectives. Why are these plants important? Problems they cause, how they impact our environment. So let's ask, what are aquatic plants? Aquatic plants are those that grow partly or wholly in water. They may be rooted in the mud or floating freely. Plants are natural and important components of the aquatic environment. Microscopic plants or algae form the base of the aquatic food chain. Larger algae and plants provide habitat for fish and food organisms, and all plants produce oxygen as they photosynthesize during the daylight hours. You need to know, however, excessive growth of these plants can have a detrimental effect on a body of water and its inhabitants. Many shallow, nutrient-rich ponds, lakes, and drainage ditches provide ideal conditions for abundant aquatic plant growth. Effective management of aquatic plants requires an integrated approach that incorporates cultural, mechanical, biological, and chemical methods as appropriate. There's an important key point here. When conditions are right in shallow, nutrient-rich waters, these plant populations can explode. Another key point is that uncontrolled aquatic plant growth can severely degrade the ecological health, the economic value, and the recreational usability of our waters. It's important to note here what can be included as an aquatic pest. Aquatic pests may include algae, flowering plants, invertebrates, and vertebrates. These organisms are considered pests when they compromise the economic, the environmental, or recreational uses of a body of water. You need to understand aquatic weeds can be considered a pest if they impact recreation on the water, and this can also create an economic impact. This may take the form of aesthetic degradation, like unsightly masses of algae, recreational interference like dense growths of aquatic plants that impede boats and swimmers, and ecological damage such as an overpopulation of carp, which may ruin habitat for more desirable species. In addition, aquatic weeds may compromise public health by providing good habitat for disease-vectoring organisms like mosquitoes. Again, these types of weed growth can cause algal blooms, recreational interference, and overpopulation of carp. Here's another longer list of what these aquatic weeds do. They interfere with or prohibit recreational activities such as swimming, fishing, and boating. They detract from the aesthetic appeal of a body of water. They stunt or interfere with a balanced fish population. They cause fish kills due to oxygen depletion from the water and occur when the plants die or decompose. They produce quiet water areas that are ideal for mosquito breeding. Certain algae can give water bad taste and odors. They can impede water flow in drainage ditches, irrigation canals, and culverts, causing water to back up. The deposition of weeds, sediment, and debris can cause bodies of water to fill in. And it's definitely true that deposition of weeds, sediment, and debris can cause bodies of water to fill in. Limited flow water impoundments. Ditches may be intermittently wet or dry, depending on climatic conditions. Their purpose is to drain the surrounding land area, so considerable amounts of water must pass through. Herbicides applied to these habitats may move downstream following an influx of water from surrounding areas. Many farm ponds may have limited flow because there nearly always is an overflow pipe and an emergency overflow channel or spillway. An overflow pipe permits passage of a continuous and relatively well-defined amount of water at all times. An emergency spillway provides a release when storms dump excess amounts of water into a pond in a short time. Overflow or release water can carry small amounts of aquatic herbicides downstream from the application site. Sudden rainstorms that interrupt or come immediately after a pesticide application can move larger amounts downstream. Let's think about one of the ways that herbicides move in different types of water systems. Limited flow water impoundments, such as ponds or ditches, even small amounts of herbicides can move downstream from overflow. Heavy rainfall can quickly wash larger quantities of herbicides downstream. You must understand that aquatic herbicide applications require a real understanding of effects. Runoff carried by currents in streams is a major concern. And we really need to be aware of these moving type of waters in streams, creeks, and rivers. There's always going to be some detectable downstream current. Varying amounts of pesticides may move downstream from application sites. These situations present the greatest potential as environmental hazards. We also need to understand that aquatic pest management techniques are often very different from terrestrial methods. Management goals and plans must be tailored to each water body because each is unique. Because these systems are interconnected, an action taken at one point in a watershed may have serious consequences downstream. Understanding watersheds as far-reaching systems is fundamental to safely and effectively managing aquatic pests. If control is necessary, determine the level of pest control you need: prevention, suppression, or eradication. Choose the methods that will do a cost-effective job of managing the pest while causing the least possible harm to people and the environment. Remember, pesticides and herbicides are valuable tools, but they should be used only when and where they are warranted. Consider chemical control when pest numbers or the damage the pests are causing is unacceptable. When other pest management methods will not provide effective control, or when your knowledge of the situation indicates that you need to use a pesticide preventatively. Remember, never try to control any pest until you know what it is. If you use a pesticide or herbicide, follow the label directions carefully. Another important fact: identification is key in pest management. The reality is you can't effectively manage something if you don't know what you're dealing with. Misidentification is also an issue and can lead to ineffective techniques and effects on non-target species. The management of aquatic pests rarely relies on a single control practice. Usually, a variety of tactics are integrated to maintain pests at acceptable levels. Integrated pest management, known as IPM, is an approach to the management of pests in which all available control methods are evaluated and integrated into a unified program. IPM is like having a box of tools. Using the right tool or combination of tools at the right time to manage pests sustainably. IPM is a strategy that looks at all available ways to control pests. Control methods used in IPM include physical, mechanical, cultural, biological, and chemical. Applying multiple control methods minimizes the chance that pests will adapt to any one method. IPM programs use current, comprehensive information on pest life cycles and their interaction with the environment. This information, in combination with available pest control methods, is used to manage pest damage by the most economical means and with the least possible hazard to people, property, and the environment. The goal of IPM is not to eliminate all pests. Some pests are tolerable and essential, so their natural enemies remain in the environment. Instead, the aim is to reduce pest populations far enough that they are not economically damaging. Pest control measures, whether chemical or cultural, rarely affect the targeted pest species alone, but in many cases also influence other components of the ecosystem, especially in aquatic systems. Sometimes control measures can adversely affect the environment by contaminating water, causing soil erosion, or harming wildlife or wildlife habitat. Preventing spread. Invasive plants can appear quickly even in isolated aquatic sites. Plant materials such as spores, seeds, or fragments can often be carried by the wind, water, animals, and human beings. People are primary movers of aquatic weeds and mollusks, transporting pests on boats, boat trailers, fishing waders, and on feet or clothing. People also contribute to the spread of aquatic weeds by disposing of aquarium plants into water bodies and by using such weeds to pack bait like worms or minnows. The following guidelines can help prevent the spread of aquatic weeds. Monitor and eradicate small, new infestations. Communicate with neighbors and other applicators about nearby weedy areas, infestation levels, and control practices. Communication can alert you to new weeds and help focus monitoring efforts. Early treatment can prevent large infestations. Physical and mechanical control. There are many methods of mechanical and physical aquatic pest control. Some of these are not feasible without proper equipment, sufficient labor, or money, but mechanical control can be effective while minimizing environmental contamination. These methods include both hand pulling or raking and the use of mechanical equipment. Hand pulling or raking can be quite effective for small strands of aquatic weeds, but it requires hard, heavy, stooping labor and is extremely time-consuming. Weeds may resprout from leftover material. Harvesters cut rooted vegetation 4 to 6 feet below the water surface. They are primarily used on larger lakes or rivers. Most mechanical harvesters cut the vegetation and remove or harvest it from the water body. Timing of mechanical harvesting or cutting can be very important. At certain times of the year, cutting will actually stimulate plant growth. Harvesting provides only temporary control and can be very costly. Cultural control. Cultural control usually refers to ways of managing landscapes through crop and soil management, but in an aquatic context. We can simply call it habitat alteration. Cultural control methods in ponds, lakes, and streams include shoreline alterations, winter drawdowns, bottom covers, or benthic barriers, dyeing, and aeration. Shoreline alterations generally involve lining shorelines with rocks or other hard materials to prevent both erosion and the establishment of unwanted vegetation. Winter drawdown means decreasing the water level in the lake or pond in order to expose shallow areas to freezing and drying conditions. This is effective for controlling many submerged and rooted floating weeds. Drawdown is usually accomplished with structures built to control water flow in the water body, the installation of siphoning systems, or naturally as a result of low rainfall. One benefit of partial drawdown is the concentration of fish in one small, deep area away from the shallow weed zone. Concentration enables larger fish to more effectively prey on small fish and results in an overall improvement in fish quality. In addition, drawdown will dry and compact the exposed sediments, which will deepen the water body. Drawdowns tend to restructure the species composition of the lake ecosystem. Plants that are susceptible to drawdown include many of the pondweeds, water lily, and water shield. Increasing the water level in a pond may control emergent weeds by drowning free-floating species, by flooding or washout, and submerged species through light limitation because of the deeper water column. However, the killed plant material should be removed after this operation to prevent decomposition in the water. Dyeing with non-toxic dyes can inhibit submerged plant growth. The dye prevents sunlight from getting to the plants and interferes with photosynthesis. While this may be beneficial in controlling aquatic weeds, it can also affect growth of desirable species. This is a very simple and easy control method to implement. The dye spreads easily in water and must simply be maintained throughout the season to control weeds. However, the use of dye is limited to water bodies with no outflow. Dyes must be applied early in the spring before weeds emerge and reach the surface of the water. Dyes used for aquatic weed control are pesticides and are subject to the same laws and regulations as any pesticide. Always follow the label in either case. Aeration can improve aquatic environments by raising oxygen levels. However, its influence on aquatic weed growth may be good or bad depending on the characteristics of the particular site where it is used. Injection of air into lake bottoms draws algae into the deeper areas where limited sunlight slows their growth. However, injection may also disturb bottom sediments and release nutrients that increase weed growth. Improve dissolved oxygen, DO, levels from aeration may increase the magnitude of algal blooms, but not always. Each water body is different and should be evaluated carefully before aeration. Biological control. Biological control uses living organisms like insects, animals, and pathogens to control undesirable vegetation or insect pests. Biological control occurs naturally, but releasing more of a pest's natural enemies, parasites, predators, or disease agents into the target area can increase this natural control. Biological control agents are used in aquatic environments to control insects, mites, and some weeds. For example, the snout moth species Acentria ephemerella has been successfully used to control Eurasian water milfoil. Biological control does not aim to eradicate pests, but to keep them at low, manageable levels as part of a balanced ecosystem. Acentria is a monotypic moth genus of the family Crambidae. It is used as an agent of biological pest control against the noxious aquatic plant known as Eurasian water milfoil. For a biological control agent to be successful, it must be adaptable and voracious. Selectivity is very desirable, particularly among organisms feeding on emergent plants. After their introduction, biocontrol agents can take 5 to 10 years to become established and increase to numbers large enough to reduce the density of the target pest. Once established, effective biological controls provide an inexpensive and long-term means to control weed populations. Pesticides are registered for the specific uses and application methods for which they have been tested. Uses other than those indicated on the label are unlawful and may not provide the needed control. Off-label use can adversely affect non-target species on and off-site by drift or movement in soil and water. Furthermore, unauthorized use may pose a hazard to human health. Please note, it is illegal to use higher rates of pesticide than are specified on the label, but you are permitted to use lower rates as long as the label does not prohibit it. Again, because aquatic systems are so interconnected and so vital to human and animal welfare, it is especially important to understand the pesticide you are using when working in a water-dominated site. Pesticides for use in aquatic systems can include herbicides for vascular plants, algicides for planktonic and filamentous algae, molluscicides for shelled aquatic animals, insecticides for nuisance insects, pesticides for fish, and repellents for large vertebrates. Aquatic plants are important to the healthy functioning of lake and stream ecosystems. They are essential for many ecological functions, including the production of oxygen for other organisms, the prevention of shoreline erosion, stabilization of the lake bottom, and as food for fish, waterfowl, and other animals. Before taking any action to change the aquatic plant life in a water body, it is necessary to understand the essential ecological role played by a healthy plant community. To effectively manage vegetation, it's crucial to comprehend how aquatic weeds become established and the environmental factors that support them. This knowledge will also aid in selecting the most suitable management option for your specific situation. Therefore, the key question to ask yourself is, what caused the problem? Before taking any pest control action, IPM first sets an action threshold or economic threshold, a point at which pest populations indicate that pest control action must be taken to prevent significant economic, recreation, or native species habitat loss. When evaluating aquatic sites, it is vital to take note of many factors, including the location of the body of water, how the body of water is being used, such as recreation, irrigation, municipal, also the history of water use and previous management practices, the goals, attitudes, and expectations of water users, where the water flows in and out of the site, the number, age, size, ecological role, and abundance of any fish species that are present, the diversity of birds, animals, and other organisms that depend on this body of water, the native and non-native vegetation that is present, the physical characteristics of the water body, such as depth, surface area, sedimentation, and shape, the quality and appearance of the water's edge and banks, and the surrounding area in terms of development and activity, such as housing, industry, and agriculture. Growth regulating factors. Sunlight and nutrients are the two factors that have the largest impact on aquatic plant growth and spread. For submerged plants, the depth of light penetration will determine the depth to which such plants will grow. The available plant nutrients determine the amount of vegetation that can be produced. Other important growth factors include temperature, the stability of substrate or bottom, and protection from water and wind disturbance. Light. Aquatic plants cannot grow in turbid or murky water or water that is too deep because, like all plants, they need sunlight to produce sugars. However, many grow at very low light intensities. The photic zone is the part of a body of water in which light intensity is sufficient to support plant growth. The photic zone, by definition, extends to the depth at which light intensity is equivalent to 1% of full sunlight. In muddy ponds, the photic zone may extend only a few inches, while in very clear water bodies, it may extend to a depth of 30 feet or more. The shallower the water body, the more likely it is to have a photic zone that extends to the bottom sediments where aquatic plants can root and grow. Water clarity is influenced by the lake's suspended sediments, those stirred up by strong winds or currents, by vegetation, surrounding soils, human impacts, and water hardness. Water hardness is a measure of the dissolved elements calcium, magnesium, iron, and strontium. Charged atoms of these elements can bind with the suspended particles such as clay and organic matter, causing them to precipitate or settle out of solution. Precipitation removes particles that would normally reduce water clarity. This means hard waters are generally clearer than soft waters with low calcium and magnesium concentrations. Clear waters, in turn, have greater depths of light penetration and may support larger weed populations. For many lakes and streams, turbidity is the most important environmental issue affecting individual water bodies. But what is turbidity, and where does it come from? Turbidity is a measure of the particles suspended in the water that absorb or scatter light. Examples of turbidity causing particles are industrial pollution, suspended inorganic and organic soil, phytoplankton, also known as algae, and zooplankton. A stream overflows its banks, flooding the surrounding land after heavy rain. The brown, turbid water now carries nutrients that can harm the lake downstream and cause algal blooms. Causes of turbidity. Some turbidity is natural. If it weren't for some particles in the water, there would be almost no aquatic life. However, turbidity is often excessive. But where does this extra turbidity come from? Feedback loops. Turbidity breeds more turbidity in a cascading feedback loop. Turbid conditions reduce aquatic plant life. Aquatic plants promote clear water conditions by filtering out nutrients and holding in sediment. As aquatic plants are lost, fewer nutrients are taken out of the water and are left over to fuel algal blooms. Without the rooted plants, the bottom sediments are easily disturbed by waves, adding to turbidity. The loss of plants and increased turbidity creates conditions that favor bottom-feeding rough fish. Their increased population disturbs even more sediment and harms remaining aquatic plants. This cascading effect can turn a lake or river system into a turbid nightmare. It can be difficult to reverse the feedback loop, and sometimes it is economically or socially impossible to fix. It is crucial to prevent lakes and rivers from going into a turbid state in the first place. Measuring turbidity. Several tools can be used to measure the turbidity of lakes and streams. The most commonly used is a Secchi disc because of its ease of use and it is inexpensive. A Secchi disc is a weighted circle that hangs off a rope and is divided into 4 alternating white and black parts. The disc is lowered into the water column until it disappears from view. When it disappears, the depth is noted. Then the disc is brought back up until it can be seen again. Depth noted, and then averaged with the first one. The accuracy of the disc is affected by cloud cover, the angle of the sun, and waves on the surface. The Secchi disc fails in areas where it is shallow, and the disc hits the bottom before it disappears from view. This device is called the Secchi disc. This 8-inch diameter black and white disc is attached to a string that has been marked for length and is lowered into the water until it disappears from view. This length of string is recorded. This measurement is known as the Secchi depth. Nutrients. Along with sunlight, plants require certain elements for their biological processes. The introduction of large amounts of these nutrients and sediments into water bodies is a primary factor in water quality deterioration. Human inputs, such as wastewater and fertilization, are the most important contributors of excess nutrients to aquatic systems. The elements of chief concern are nitrogen and phosphorus, which can cause the eutrophication and are found in most fertilizers as well as in organic waste. Eutrophication is a process in which a water body becomes overly enriched with nutrients, leading to plentiful growth of simple plant life such as algae and plankton. The excessive growth of these organisms is an indicator of this process. Eutrophication sets off a chain reaction in the ecosystem, starting with an overabundance of algae and plants. The excess algae and plant matter eventually decompose, producing large amounts of carbon dioxide, which lowers the pH of seawater, a process known as ocean acidification. Phytoplankton or free-floating algae, filamentous algae, and free-floating flowering plants all obtain their nutrients directly from the water. Rooted plants obtain their nutrients from the water column and bottom sediments by root uptake. Therefore, both water and sediment nutrient content is a concern in an aquatic IPM program. Even if water nutrient content is low, dense strands of weeds can grow if they are rooted in nutrient-rich sediments. Nutrients enter water bodies from the following sources: precipitation, rain or snow, streams, springs, groundwater, urban and rural runoff, water-carrying compounds in solution, or soil particles with contaminants bound to them. A watershed is the area in which these sources are generated and through which they move. In general, the larger the watershed, the greater the amount of nutrients being deposited into a water body, thus, the greater the water body's potential to produce aquatic plants and algae. Runoff is a major contributor to nutrient loading, the enrichment of surface water nutrients. Excessive nutrient loading leads to eutrophication, the loss of dissolved oxygen from the water, which causes severe reductions in water quality. Often, the most productive areas of water bodies are shallow, shoreline areas where nutrient loading from runoff is greatest. Urban watersheds contribute nutrients in the form of sewage or discharge, storm sewer drainage, and septic field seepage. Agricultural sources include runoff from fertilized fields, feedlots, and pastures. These additional nutrients can be used by algae and aquatic plants to produce excessive vegetative growth. Now, as algae and plants die, they fall to the lake bottom and decompose. This decomposed material contributes to nutrient loading in the hydrosoil and to the formation of organic materials. Decomposition is caused by the activity of microbes and bacteria whose respiration lowers the dissolved oxygen level in a water body. If too much plant material is decomposing, fish kills can occur as a result of a radically reduced dissolved oxygen level. Many ponds have dissolved oxygen levels less than 10 ppm. Below 3 ppm, plants and fish will become stressed. Plant management activities, such as mechanical cutting without harvesting or herbicide treatments, along with seasonal dieback, can dramatically reduce dissolved oxygen in a water body. You should be aware of this possibility when managing aquatic plants. Dissolved oxygen is arguably the most critical water quality factors for pond managers to understand. While our atmosphere consists of a 20% oxygen, or 200,000 ppm, water typically holds oxygen at much lower concentrations. It's rare for a pond to have more than 10 ppm of dissolved oxygen. Concentrations below 3 ppm can stress most warm water fish species, and levels below 2 ppm can be fatal for some species. Fish that have been stressed by dissolved oxygen levels around 2 or 3 ppm often become more susceptible to disease. Oxygen enters the water from two main sources, the atmosphere and aquatic plants. The primary contributors of oxygen in a pond are microscopic algae, also known as phytoplankton, or submerged plants. In the presence of sunlight, these organisms produce oxygen through photosynthesis and release it into the pond water. However, at night and on very cloudy days, algae and submerged plants consume oxygen from the water for respiration. During daylight hours, plants typically generate more oxygen than they use, thereby supplying oxygen to the fish and other organisms in the pond. Oxygen depletions are the leading cause of fish kills in ponds. They mainly occur during the summer months because warm water holds less dissolved oxygen than cooler water, and because the pond's oxygen demand is higher in warm conditions. Fish kills due to oxygen depletions can vary from partial to total. In a partial kill, the dissolved oxygen levels drop low enough to suffocate sensitive species and large fish, while many small fish and hardy species survive. Most oxygen depletions result in partial fish kills. Total fish kills are relatively rare in recreational ponds, except for those with extremely high fish populations over 1,000 pounds per acre. Excessive phytoplankton. The abundance of planktonic algae, very green water, in a pond is generally related to the amount of nutrients present in the water. Nutrients can wash into the pond from woods, pastures, fields, human activities in the watershed, or come from pond fertilization. Generally, the more nutrients, the more planktonic algae or other aquatic plants will grow or bloom. Although phytoplankton is good from an abundance of natural food and oxygen-producing standpoint, it can become too abundant or excessive. When phytoplankton becomes so abundant that water visibility is limited to less than 12 inches, there is a danger of oxygen depletion. These heavy or dense blooms use large amounts of dissolved oxygen at night and on very cloudy or overcast, windless days, causing an oxygen depletion and fish kill. This problem is often a consequence of over-fertilizing, overfeeding, or excessive nutrients from livestock, fields, or septic lines. Phytoplankton die-off. Phytoplankton populations or blooms can grow rapidly, particularly on sunny days when the water is warm and nutrients are available. Alternatively, they can die off quickly, especially in the spring and fall as water temperatures change rapidly with weather fronts. However, a bloom die-off can occur at any time of the year with little or no warning. Typically, during a bloom die-off, the color of the water will start to change. Leading up to a bloom die-off, the pond water may have a streaky appearance. Streaks of brown or gray-black through the otherwise green water of the pond is an indication that the algae are starting to die. As the die-off progresses, the whole pond will turn from green to gray, brown, or clear. The pond water will typically clear after a die-off as the dead algae settle to the bottom. Plankton die-offs cause rapid oxygen depletions for two reasons. 1. The remaining dissolved oxygen is consumed by aerobic bacteria and the fungi in the process of decaying the dead algae, and 2. Few live phytoplankton remain to produce more oxygen. Secchi discs can be used to monitor bloom densities. Any bloom that reduces visibility in the pond to 12 inches or less may cause oxygen problems. Temperature. Temperature is an important factor in determining the life cycles and distribution of aquatic plants. In temperate zones, colder temperatures in the fall, combined with changes in photoperiod, day length, cause plants to die back to the soil or bottom sediments. Overwintering aquatic plants include sago pondweed, Eurasian milfoil, and Elodea. Most aquatic plants emerge from the sediment when temperatures warm in the spring, sprouting from vegetative structures such as tubers or underground stems called rhizomes. They also germinate from seeds, root crowns, or overwintering bud structures called turions. Aquatic weeds grow best in the warm waters of late spring and early summer, usually reaching maximum size by midsummer. Shallow water warms faster than deep water, and shallow areas usually exhibit the first signs of plant growth, providing aquatic plants with long growing seasons. This is true even in the northern states, where the growing season is normally short. You should be able to observe changes in plant growth as a response to temperature in the lakes and ponds you are managing. This will enable you to predict and identify weed growth stages, which will give you information you can use to decide on a management technique that will be the most effective. For example, curlyleaf pondweed begins to grow soon after the ice melts. It usually completes its life cycle and collapses around the end of June to early July. The easiest time to control this weed is after its emergence, but prior to turion formation. Substrate, soil, and sediment. A stable substrate, the base on which an organism lives, is required for the attachment of rooted aquatic plants. Sand tends to shift, so does not make a good substrate in flowing waters or along shorelines exposed to wind and wave action. Aquatic plants prefer substrates composed of a good mixture of sand, clay, and organic matter because those small, charged particles attract and hold nutrients for plants to take up through their roots. Rock and large gravel substrates discourage plant growth because they are nutrient poor. Slope, topography, and hydrology are also important in substrate sustainability. Runoff and erosion of terrestrial sediments may cause buildup along shorelines and at the mouths of inflowing streams. These areas are opportune for plant rooting and seed germination. Shallow areas with gradually sloping bottoms are also prime locations for weed infestations. By contrast, deep water bodies with steep sides provide few sites for plant attachment. pH. pH is a measure of how acidic or alkaline, basic, a solution is. In other words, it measures the concentration of hydrogen cations, H+, present in a solution. The pH scale ranges from 1, very acidic, high concentrations of hydrogen ions, to 14, very alkaline, low concentrations of hydrogen ions. 7 is a neutral pH, in which hydrogen and hydroxide ions are present in equal amounts. Freshwater lakes and streams range in pH from very acidic, pH 2, to very alkaline, pH 12. However, in the majority of open lakes, pH is between 6 and 9. Origins and establishment of weeds. Identifying both native and introduced species in your managed areas will allow you to anticipate changes in aquatic environments due to exotic plant invasion or your management practices. As an aquatic pest manager, strive to promote the continued existence of beneficial plants and minimize the production of weed species. Native plants are those which have historic origins in the area and were not introduced by human activity. Natural enemies, competition from other plants, and environmental conditions hold back many native weed populations in check. Native plants fulfill vital roles in aquatic ecosystems. They stabilize the substrate, filter storm and runoff water as it moves through the area, and provide habitat or shelter for other aquatic organisms. Introduced plants or exotic species came from other parts of the country or world through human activity. Most of our problem weeds are introduced plants. Some escape plants were intentionally introduced by humans as crops, forage, or ornamentals. They have subsequently spread beyond their intended areas. Weed establishment and persistence. Many introduced aquatics are capable of displacing or crowding out native vegetation. Weeds are opportunistic organisms. That is, they take advantage of favorable conditions to propagate and invade an area. Any practice that allows weed seeds to germinate, begin to produce roots and leaves, or that allow plant parts to reproduce will create conditions for weeds to become established in that area. Weed infestations cause several problems with aquatic ecosystems. Once weeds and algae get a foothold, they spread rapidly, crowding out native vegetation and reducing the economic or recreational value of the waterway. Many, including Eurasian water milfoil, form dense mats of near-surface vegetation that cover large areas, blocking sunlight to more desirable species below. The mats can make waterways impassable by watercraft and make fishing, boating, and swimming difficult. In addition, they adversely affect the chemistry of the underlying water, degrading the habitat of both fish and their prey. Weeds spread when seeds or living plant parts, roots, rhizomes, tubers, etc., are moved into a new territory. Some invading weed species have evolved special seed shapes or structures to aid their movement by wind, water, or animals. Also, many plants have vegetative parts that break off, sprout new shoots, and subsequently root. If these plant fragments are carried into new areas, they may grow and start new infestations. In aquatic areas, it is especially easy for weed populations to become established because of readily available water. Monocots and dicots. Flowering plants can also be divided into monocots and dicots. Monocots. When monocots germinate, they have a single primary leaf or cotyledon. The cotyledon does not emerge above the soil surface, and the first leaves you see are actually secondary or true leaves. All monocots have narrow leaves with parallel veins, thus the term narrow-leaved plants, and usually have a fibrous root system. They most commonly reproduce by seed, stolons, or rhizomes. The growing point in monocots is frequently at or below the soil surface, particularly in young plants. Monocots include the grasses and cattails, as well as pondweeds, naiads, and watermeal. Dicots. When dicots emerge from the soil, they have two primary leaves or cotyledons. The cotyledons often do not look like later true leaves. Dicots usually have broad leaves, thus the term broad-leaved plants, with veins that form a net-like pattern. All species can reproduce by seed, but some have vegetative buds in the crown, and still others reproduce by spreading rootstocks. Dicots include broadleaf weeds and forbs, shrubs, and trees. They also include the water milfoils, coontail, and water lilies. In the image, you're seeing an example of the parts of a dicot and monocot. We'll give you a few seconds to review this. Common aquatic weed life cycles. Plants can be classified according to their cycles as annuals, biennials, or perennials. These are not strict botanical divisions. but groupings that are important in determining how to control the plants. Annuals. Annual weeds mature in one season and are propagated exclusively by seeds. When mature, the seeds sink to the soil or hydrosoil and remain dormant until conditions for germination are favorable. These plants die back to the substrate in the winter. Among the aquatic annuals are coontail and some of the naiads. Summer annual weeds grow from seeds that sprout in the spring, mature, and reproduce before dying in the winter. Winter annual weeds germinate in the fall or winter and grow until spring when they flower, produce seed, and die. Annuals are easily controlled by weeding, dredging, or herbicides, especially if control methods are undertaken before the plants have set seed. Biennials. Biennial weeds require 2 years to develop and complete their life cycles. In the first year, these plants often produce basal leaves called a rosette, basal leaves, and a taproot. In the second year, the plant flowers, produces seed, and generally dies. Perennial herbaceous plants. Perennial weeds vary in growth habits. They differ in development rate, root reserve depletion, dieback of shoots after flowering, and regrowth after flowering. Perennials. Most aquatic weeds are perennials. Perennial weeds are plants that live indefinitely. They may lose their foliage during the winter and die back to the substrate, but they recover in the spring. They flower and set seed without dying. Common examples are Eurasian water milfoil, American pondweed, and hydrilla. Most aquatic perennials are herbaceous, soft-bodied. Perennials reproduce both vegetatively and by seed, and can store food in their roots or rhizomes. Weed growth stages. Like all flowering plants, weeds develop through 4 growth stages: seedling, vegetative, flowering, and maturity. Annual plants. Vegetative. Plants in the vegetative growth stage use most of their energy resources to produce stems, leaves, and roots. Flowering. During this time, most weed energy resources go into seed production. Maturity. Maturity and seed set complete the life cycle of annuals. Common aquatic weeds. Algae, singular, alga, are simple organisms with no roots, though they may have holdfast cells that anchor them to the substrate. They are generally classified as either planktonic, filamentous, or erect. Planktonic algae are individual algae cells that are suspended in the water or form a film on the surface. These organisms are responsible for low water clarity and may cause allergic or toxic reactions in sensitive people. They can accumulate on the downwind sides of lakes, forming unsightly gelatinous masses on the shoreline. Many lakes and reservoirs with nuisance planktonic algae also have very fertile hydrosoils. Reducing planktonic algae may result in increased water clarity and therefore increased plant growth. Being aware of this possibility will help you make informed decisions about algae control. Common planktonic algae genera include Calidomonas, Euglena, and Clostridium. Description. Microscopic organisms, which when present in great numbers are called an algal bloom. Habitat. Occur in all types of water bodies and are important in the aquatic food chain. Biology and ecology. Least abundant in winter or during other cold periods when temperature inhibits their growth. Damage. Large blooms can cause overshading of desirable plants and may also cause oxygen depletion, leading to fish kills. Filamentous algae can be split into two groups, attached or free-floating. Attached algae have some kind of holdfast cell that anchors them to rocks or other substrates. They are usually found on docks, seawalls, boats, and other hard surfaces. They vary in texture from slimy to coarse and hair-like. Free-floating filaments often form mats on sediments, continually increasing in size and layers. These layers can form unsightly floating rafts on the water surface that trap debris. These rafts are commonly referred to as pond scum. Filamentous algae may pose issues in soils where substantial rooted vegetation has been removed carelessly or in areas with elevated nutrient levels. Controlling nutrient input can aid in managing bothersome filamentous algae, provided they are not thriving on nutrient-dense sediment. Prominent genera of filamentous algae consist of Spirogyra, Oscillatoria, Oedogonium, and Anabaena. Description: single algal cells that form long visible chains, threads, hairs, or filaments. Filaments often intertwine to form a mat resembling wet wool. Habitat: occur in all types of water bodies. Biology and ecology. Blooms start to grow along the bottom in clear, shallow water in spring, where light can penetrate to the bottom. Cells and filaments are often attached to structures like rocks or aquatic plants. As reproduction increases, mats of algae may float to the surface. These mats are often referred to as pond scum. Damage. Sudden die-offs of dense mats can cause water quality problems and oxygen depletion, as well as aesthetic and odor issues as the algae decompose. Erect algae resemble vascular plants and grow from the sediment. They do not have roots, but have holdfast structures similar to those in filamentous algae. Filamentous algae. They do not have roots, but have holdfast structures similar to those in filamentous algae. These organisms are considered valuable in maintaining water quality because they cover the sediment and absorb nutrients that are released. This aids in preventing the establishment of other nuisance algae or plant species. Erect algae genera include Chara and Nitella. Description: submerged erect algae, often confused with submerged flowering plants. Chara has a foul, musty, garlic-like odor and a grainy or crunchy texture, with whorled leaves with 6 to 16 small branchlets around each node. Nitella is soft to the touch and does not smell, and has forked, bushy branches. Habitat: erect algae thrive in various aquatic settings and tend to bloom in ponds where nutrients are present. Biology and ecology. The spread of blooms typically starts in early spring when water temperatures rise. Damage: if dense blooms of erect algae are permitted to persist, They can create issues for swimmers and boaters. Extensive die-offs may lead to reduced oxygen levels, resulting in fish mortality. Algal life cycles. Unlike their terrestrial counterparts, algae lack intricate sexual structures, leading their life cycles to focus more on the dispersal of reproductive cells rather than specific seasonal patterns. Algae can reproduce via gametes, sex cells, spores, or fragmentation. Many of the spores produced by algae are zoospores, which possess flagella and are capable of swimming in water. Since most algal cells are either unicellular or form loosely connected groups, they can reproduce at any time. The ability explains the sudden onset of algal blooms. When conditions in the water are favorable, such as high nutrient levels, algal cells will swiftly begin to multiply. In many types of algae, the zygote represents the dormant phase, which is similar to the embryo that forms in the seeds of vascular plants. The zygote is encased in robust compounds that shield it from desiccation during adverse conditions. Once the environment becomes favorable again, the zygote can undergo cell division and generate new cells in the aquatic habitat. This characteristic contributes to the challenge of completely eliminating algae. Flowering plants. Aquatic flowering plants exhibit various predominant growth forms. Submerged. Submerged plants thrive entirely beneath the water's surface, relying on waterborne nutrients for their physiological needs. Typical examples of submerged plants include water milfoils, naiads, pondweeds, coontail, and elodea. Their reproduction mainly occurs through vegetative fragmentation, vegetative reproductive structures, or seeds. Hydrilla. Description: invasive. Submerged. Healthy leaves are bright green. While stressed, leaves may be brown or yellow. Long, slender stems. Leaves are up to 2 centimeters long, have a midrib on the underside with one or more sharp teeth along it, and leaf margins are sawtooth, found with whorls of 4 to 8. Often confused with native elodea and Brazilian elodea, but leaves of other species are usually much smoother than hydrilla. Will produce tubers unlike most similar species, elodea, Brazilian elodea. Roots to the bottom in depths up to 25 feet. If present, flowers are fine, white, and appear singly on thread-like stalks. Biology and ecology. Perennial. Reproduces through vegetative fragments, tubers, turions, and possibly seed. Both dioecious and monoecious populations are found in the U.S. Only female dioecious plants are present in the U.S. and do not reproduce sexually. Monoecious hydrilla will flower and may be capable of producing viable seed. In northern areas, monoecious hydrilla will form tubers and turions in mid to late summer. Damage. Form stents, single species stands that impact water flow, sedimentation, water quality, and recreational use. Brazilian elodea. Egeria. Description: invasive. This plant is submerged. Its leaves and stems are a vivid green, giving the entire plant a lush appearance. The leaves are finely serrated, measuring 1 to 3 centimeters in length, and are quite thin, arranged in whorls of 4 to 8. The flowers are small, and white, featuring 3 petals, and they extend above the water surface. Roots can anchor to the bottom in depths of up to 20 feet. Habitat: found in both still and flowing waters, lakes, ponds, ditches, and streams. Biology and ecology: perennial. Reproduces only vegetatively. Growth begins when water temperatures reach 50 degrees. Flowering occurs in the late spring and again in the fall. During the summer, profuse branching forms a dense canopy. Damage: forms dense, single-species stands that restrict water flow, trap sediment, and impact water quality. Coontail. Description: submerged, dark olive green, rootless, forms dense colonies. Leaves are stiff, whorled, serrated. Tips of branches are crowded with leaves, giving it a feathery, fur-like appearance. Flowers are tiny and appear at the joint between the leaf and stem. Habitat: prefers fresh to slightly brackish waters in lakes, streams, ponds, ditches, and marshes, and standing to slow-moving waters. Biology and ecology: perennial. Reproduces by seed and fragmentation. Flowers from spring to early fall. Damage: large stands will decrease the recreational and habitat uses of the water body, and will also crowd out more desirable and appropriate species. Curly-leaf pondweed. Description: invasive. Submerged, land-shaped, reddish-green leaves with wavy and finely toothed margins. Stems are branched and somewhat flattened. Flowers are very small and inconspicuous, arranged in a dense spike on a curved stalk. Habitat: grows in fresh to slightly brackish waters, can grow in waters up to 12 feet in depth, prefers quite alkaline and even eutrophic waters of lakes, streams, and ponds. Biology and ecology: perennial. Flowers from spring through summer. Tolerates low light and low water temperatures. Produces turions in late spring, then dies back, leaving only fruit and turions which survive the summer. Turions germinate in the fall, and a very small plant overwinters, growing quickly again as temperatures rise in the spring. Impact: forms thick clusters that can overshadow indigenous aquatic species. Dense surface layers can disrupt recreational activities in the water. Additionally, it may lead to higher phosphorus levels and reduced oxygen due to dieback that occurs in midsummer. Freshwater eelgrass, wild celery. Description: submerged, rooted plant with long, thin, ribbon-like leaves about 1/2 inch wide and commonly 3 to 4 feet long. Vein pattern is distinctive, resembling celery. Single white flowers grow to the surface on long stalks, fruits and capsules resembling bananas. Habitat: found in flowing water, prefers ponds, lakes, and streams at depths up to 12 feet. Biology and ecology: vast rhizome system allows it to form dense colonies and exclude other submerged plants. In winter, buds or turions form at the plant's base. In spring, these buds grow and release stolons, which produce a new plant. Flowers from late summer to early September. Damage: clogs waterways, wraps around boat propellers, reduces overall recreational quality of the water body. Elodea. Description: submerged, rooted, multi-branch plant that can survive and grow as floating fragments. Leaves are dark green, blade-like, with toothed margins, about 1/2 inch long, growing in whorls of 3 flowers, have 3 white petals with a waxy coating. Habitat: prefers calcareous waters of lakes and rivers and fine sediment for rooting, biology and ecology. Perennial: flowers through the summer. Damage: can become an impenetrable mat, especially near shorelines, making recreation and boating difficult. Large mats can break off and float on the surface, shading the bottom and causing oxygen depletions. Description: invasive, submerged, long branching stems with feather-like whorled leaves. Rooted. Habitat: prefers lakes, ponds, shallow reservoirs, and low-energy areas of rivers and streams in water up to 7 feet deep. Common in areas distributed by nutrient loading, intense plant removal, or frequent motorboat use. Tolerates a range of temperatures. Biology and ecology. Perennial. Flowers emerge in early summer. Survives winter as rootstocks or sometimes as plant fragments. In late summer and fall, plants fragment easily. Damage: rapidly colonizes ponds, lakes, or areas of slow-moving water. Creates dense mats of vegetation. Shades out other native plants. Diminish habitat and food resources for fish and birds, and decreases oxygen levels in the water as the plant decays. Horned pondweed. Description: submerged. Long, thin stems produce long, hair-like leaves at nodes. Roots are long and thread-like. Seeds are distinctively horn-shaped. May be easily confused with sago pondweed, opposite leaves. Habitat: present throughout the region. Prefers brackish or fresh waters of lakes, streams, or estuaries. Prefers shallower waters but will grow in water up to 15 feet deep. Biology and ecology. Perennial. Flower in spring and summer. Begins to grow in early spring. Releases seeds by June and dies back. Damage: chokes out other plants, creates problems for boaters, reduces the recreational quality of water bodies. Illinois pondweed. Description: submerged, leaves are blade-like, 1 to 7 inches long. Fruits are greenish, 1/2 to 3 inches long, located on the tip of stems that protrude above the water surface. Habitat: prefer alkaline waters of lakes, streams, ponds, and ditches. Biology and ecology. Perennial. Flowering and fruiting late summer through fall. Damage: plants may grow rampantly and invade deep water, pushing out more diverse species. Northern water milfoil. Description: submerged, dark green, feathery leaves are grouped in fours around a hollow stem which is usually buff or pink colored. Leaves are made up of 5 to 10 pairs of leaflets. Unlike Eurasian water milfoil, this species forms winter buds, groups of small, dark, brittle leaves in late fall to winter. Habitat: grows in depths from 1 to 20 feet. Prefers lakes with fairly clear water and soft sediment soils. Biology and ecology. Perennial. Flowers summer through fall. Damage: may occur in dense patches, crowding out all other growth. Parrot feather. Description: invasive. Submerged or emergent. Grows best rooted to substrates, but can occur as a floating plant in deeper waters. Bright green freshwater herb with feather-like leaves arranged around the stem in whorls of 4 to 6. Emergent or submersed leaves differ in color and size. Emergent stems can grow as much as a foot above the water. Habitat: prefers lakes, ponds, streams, and canals, and is highly adapted to high nutrient environments. Colonizes slow-moving or still waters. Biology and ecology: spreads exclusively by fragmentation. Tough rhizomes may be transported long distances if attached to boats or trailers. Shoots begin growing from overwintered rhizomes in spring. Flowers in spring, though some plants also flower in the fall. Damage: can seriously change the physical and chemical characteristics of lakes and streams. Infestations can alter aquatic ecosystems by shading out the algae in the water column that serve as the basis of the aquatic food web. Provides choice mosquito larva habitat. In the image, you're seeing an example of parrot feather. Take a moment or two to review this. Sago pondweed. Description: submerged, stems long, thin, and highly branched, with thin filament-like leaves about 1/16 inch wide and 2 to 12 inches long. Leaves grow in thick layers and originate from a sheath. Fruit is a nut-like 1/8 inch long. May be easily confused with horned pondweed. Alternate leaves. Habitat: prefers brackish to alkaline waters of lakes, rivers, streams, and estuaries. Can tolerate turbid conditions. Biology and ecology: perennial, flowers summer through fall. Damage: clogs waterways, crowds out more desirable plants. Small pondweed. Description: submerged, delicate stems with long, narrow leaves with no petioles, 2 to 3 inches long. Flowers appear in 1 to 4 whorls on tiny spikes. Roots are fibrous. Habitat: wide tolerance of water conditions, including brackish waters. Biology and ecology: perennial. Seeds and winter buds form at lateral branch tips near leaf bases. Damage: like other pondweeds, this species can take over a water body, decreasing diversity and lowering the recreational and habitat quality of the area. Southern naiad. Description: submerged, leaves dark green to greenish purple, ribbon-like, in a whorl of 3, less than 1/2 inch wide and 1/8 inch wide. Single seeds are found encased in the leaf sheath. Flowers are found at the base of leaves but cannot be seen without magnification. Flowers are found at the base of leaves but cannot be seen without magnification. Habitat: prefers waters deeper than 3 feet with gravelly or sandy soil. Biology and ecology: annual. Reproduces by seed and fragmentation. Damage: dense beds block waterways, impede drainage, disrupt recreational activities, choke hydro turbines. Outcompetes native species. Spiny naiad, brittle naiad, marine naiad. Description: Submerged resembles southern naiad except that the leaves are highly toothed. Leaves are 1 1/4 inches long and 1/4 inch wide, with several leaves at each node. Flowers are 1/8 to 1/4 inches long in the leaf axis. Habitat prefers brackish or highly alkaline waters of lakes and ponds up to 3,000 feet elevation. Biology and ecology: perennial, flowers from summer through fall. Damage: like southern naiad, dense beds of this species block waterways, impede drainage, and disrupt recreational activities. Outcompetes other species. Variable leaf milfoil. Description: submerged, reddish, branched stems with 2 different leaf types. Above water leaves stiff, bright green, and serrated. 3/8 to 1 1/4 inches long and very thin. Submerged leaves are feather-like with flaccid, longer and wider, with 8 to 18 thin segments. Flowers are 1/8 inch long with 4 reddish oval petals in whorls. Habitat prefers shallow waters, but will grow in water up to 16 feet deep. Especially prefers silty sediments. Biology and ecology: perennial, reproduces by seed and fragmentation. Damage: an aggressive invader and can completely take over shallow ponds. Water buttercup. Description: submerged. Leaves are variable, but always alternate. Submerged leaves branch into 20 thread-like segments, 1/2 to 2 inches wide, and are attached to the stem by short petioles. Floating leaves are flat and scalloped with 3 to 5 lobes. Flowers single, on stalks that rise above the water surface, 1/2 inch wide with a yellow center and 5 white petals. Habitat: found in ponds, lake margins, ditches, and streams. Biology and ecology: perennial, blooms April through June. Damage: forms dense mats, can choke shallow, slow-moving areas, pushing out more desirable vegetation. We want to thank these esteemed photographers for allowing the use of their images. Take a moment to acknowledge these great folks. Congratulations, you have completed the course. Please proceed to the exam to receive your credit.